As crews battle three major fires burning out of control. The biggest is the so-called Camp Fire in Northern California. It's burned nearly 7,000 buildings, making it the most destructive fire in state history.
This event was the worst case scenario. It's the event that we have feared for a long time. You need to understand that factors can exist that make even the best plans not perfect or not the exact outcome that you want. And in this case, we had a fire that was moving very, very rapidly.
Claudia Cowan is reporting for us from the town of Paradise, California. It is a race against time there, right, Claudia?
That's right. Good evening, John. Well, now that it's done its worst here in Paradise, pretty much wiping out the whole town, the campfire continues to burn south and east, and now it is threatening the city of Oroville, home to some 19,000 people, and a new round of evacuations has been ordered for several communities between here and there. Tens of thousands of people who fled, sometimes right through the flames, have no idea when they'll be allowed to return. Meantime, a grim recovery effort is underway in neighborhoods that were incinerated early Thursday morning. 35 people are still unaccounted for, and police officers are going to the homes of those listed as missing. Later today, we'll find out if the death toll has risen. It now stands at 9. Most of the victims found in or near their cars, people who were desperately trying to escape the wind-driven fire.
It's becoming normal in California. We're having these fast-moving fires, and with this weather, that's the kind of incident we're going to have. Fast-moving, very intense flames.
Well, this fire has already scorched more than 100,000 acres and is 20% contained. Calmer winds today have really helped with the massive air attack, and fire crews are hoping to really build those containment lines, boost those containment numbers before strong winds return to the area this evening. Maybe as strong as what we saw here early Thursday morning, John. The difference this time, there are 3,000 firefighters here ready to respond.
Any word on the cause of that fire, Claudia?
Well, John, there are reports out today that a downed power line may have sparked this inferno. That is certainly part of this ongoing investigation into the cause. But President Trump is weighing in, and he blamed the state's forest managers, tweeting this morning, quote, "There's no reason for these massive, deadly and costly fires in California. Billions of dollars are given each year with so many lives lost, all because of gross mismanagement of the forests. Remedy now or no more Fed payments." In a later tweet, the president expressed his support for the firefighters and evacuees and his condolences for the victims. Federal funds have already been secured to help the people of Paradise recover. But you take a look around here, John, no question that effort will likely take billions and many, many years. Back to you.
Claudia Cowan. Claudia, thank you. We will continue to keep an eye on the California fire situation. But we want to turn now to politics, with Florida taking center stage. The Secretary of State ordering recounts in the Senate and governor's races there. Workers recalibrating voting machines in preparation. In the Senate race, incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson trails Republican Rick Scott by a razor-thin margin. RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel says there's reason for Republicans to worry.
It's going to be a concerning thing for every Republican right now that it's only happening in 2 Democrat counties. Every other county, even those affected by the Panhandle, got it done. But these 2 counties still can't seem to get it done. Is it because Rick Scott was ahead by 55,000 and now he's only ahead by 14,000? It's just ridiculous.
We have Fox team coverage. Garrett Tenney is in Washington with a look at some of the other unsettled midterm races. But we begin with Doug McKelway. He's in Lauderhill, Florida right now. Doug.
Hi, John, and it is now official. We are headed for a recount of 3 statewide races. The first most people outside Florida don't really care about. It's for the state agricultural commissioner. But the other 2, a lot of attention has been paid. Rick Scott versus Democrat Bill Nelson, the incumbent, separated by only 0.2 percentage points. And the governor's race, Andrew Gillum versus Ron DeSantis, separated by only 0.4 percentage points. This is first going to be a count by machine. And if the difference, the separation between any 2 of those candidates is less than 1/4 of 1 percentage point, then it goes to a hand recount. Now, while all of that moves forward, the Broward County Board of Election Supervisors is fighting back vehemently against accusations that they are corrupt and have criminal intentions. Listen up.
There have been allegations of fraud. Those are serious charges to recklessly offer out there. There's no basis for it. to give a claim of fraud without any evidence, I think is unacceptable.
But an attorney for Governor Rick Scott, who has had 18 years of examining Broward County close elections, believes it is incompetence, in fact, intentional incompetence, he says.
It's like the clowns in the little Volkswagen, and they just keep coming out, and they keep coming out, and you think, how many more could they possibly have in there? Just keep coming out, and they got them more today.
Are they overwhelmingly Democratic voters?
Oh, of course, because this is overwhelming. That's why they're here. I mean, you know, why Willie Sutton robbed the banks, that's where the money is. Well, the Democrats come here because that's where the votes are.
The President of the United States also weighing in from Europe via tweet. Mr. Trump said, trying to steal two big elections in Florida. We are watching closely. Andrew Gillum also just tweeting a little while ago. He said, I am replacing my earlier concession with an unapologetic and uncompromised call to count every vote. Perhaps most interesting, though, is the statement from Ron DeSantis. Listen up. He's not taking anything here.
Those results are clear and unambiguous, just as they were on election night.
It sounds like he's ready to move his furniture into the executive mansion in Tallahassee right now. John, back to you.
All right, we'll see who does end up occupying that mansion. Doug McKelway, thank you. A couple of other key races remain undecided days after voters went to the polls. Georgia's governor's race between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp is contested. And Arizona's high-profile contest for Senate between Kyrsten Sinema and Martha McSally remains up in the air. Garrett Tenney is live in Washington with what happens now. Garrett.
Well, John, we should know who Arizona's next senator will be by Wednesday. There are around 360,000 ballots that still need to be counted. Right now, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema is leading Republican Martha McSally by just about 20,000 votes. On Friday, Republicans and Democrats reached an agreement in court that gives the state's 15 counties until Wednesday to address problems with ballots and submit their totals. That agreement allows many of the rural, more conservative counties to accept an additional roughly 10,000 ballots, which would not have been counted otherwise due to how the counties manage mail-in ballots that have unresolved issues after Election Day. Republicans are hoping those votes will help boost McSally, but Sinema's campaign is confident it won't be enough. In a statement Friday, her campaign manager said, quote, once again, today's data confirmed our expectation that as the ballots are counted, Kyrsten will steadily build her advantage and be elected to the U.S. Senate. And a reminder, Republicans already have 52 seats in the Senate next year, and Democrats are hoping to stop that majority from getting any bigger with those tight races in Arizona as well as Florida, John.
And we mentioned that Georgia governor's race. What's the latest there?
Yeah, this was one of the most heated and closely watched governor's races in the country. Right now, Republican Brian Kemp has just over 50% of the vote, which is important because Georgia election law requires a gubernatorial candidate to have at least 50% of the vote to avoid a runoff. Democrat Stacey Abrams is refusing to concede, though. Her campaign is filing lawsuits to force counties to accept tens of thousands of ballots, which haven't been counted because they failed to meet certain deadlines or had other issues. The Secretary of State's office says there are roughly 21,000 votes that could be affected by these court challenges, which still would not be enough to force a runoff. But Abrams' campaign remains optimistic that other votes will show up somewhere along the way. On Friday, her campaign chair said, quote, our team will continue to take legal action as necessary until every eligible vote is counted and every voter's voice is heard. Now, despite these ongoing legal challenges, Brian Kemp maintains there simply isn't enough votes out there to change the outcome. He has already started his transition into the governor's office. John.
Garrett Tenney in Washington tonight. Garrett, thank you.
Got it.
Meanwhile, President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron agree that Europe should cover more of its own defense spending. The two leaders meeting in Paris today ahead of ceremonies marking 100 years since the end of World War I. And despite some tensions between them, the president says his relationship with Macron is still strong.
We have become very good friends over the last couple of years. We have much in common in many ways, perhaps more ways than people would understand, but we're very much similar in our views.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is traveling with the president and has more from Paris. John.
John, good morning to you from Paris. Both leaders do, in fact, agree that Europe should do more to pull its own weight in terms of its defense. How you get to that, though, is where they differ. The president is down for the night after a day that began early this morning. He just finished dinner at the Musée d'Orsay, along with French President Emmanuel Macron and several other world leaders, including Erdogan of Turkey and Justin Trudeau of Canada earlier. And you see there the pictures of this bilateral meeting together with French President Macron. New tensions appeared between the two leaders, who earlier this year and seem to have a real bromance going on. Macron's approval numbers are in free fall, so he's making a play to strengthen his standing in Europe, calling out European ultra-liberals for failing to look after working people, calling for the creation of a, quote, true European army to provide for the protection of Europe. The president didn't like that one bit, calling Macron's comments insulting, saying Europe should first live up to its NATO commitments before building in a new military. Listen here.
We're getting along from the standpoint of fairness, and I want it to be fair. We want to help Europe, but it has to be fair. Right now, the burden sharing has been largely on the United States, as the president will say, and he understands that.
Well, Macron's comments initially appeared to be within the context of statements that he has made before about Europe not being able to count on America rushing to its defense in the future. During that bilateral meeting, Macron said, no, this is more about Europe sharing part of the burden. Listen here.
It's unfair to have the European security today being assured just by the United States, and we need a much better burden sharing. That's why I do believe that we need more European capacities, more European defense in order to take this part of the burden. When President Trump has to protect or to defend one of the states of the United States, he doesn't ask France or Germany or another government of Europe to finance it.
The two leaders spent more than 2 hours together. They had an extended bilateral meeting after that, and then a lunch with the first ladies of the United States and France, shaking hands at the end, kisses for the first ladies. They seem to patch things back up again. The president begins his day in the 9 o'clock hour tomorrow in the commemorative ceremonies for the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. That begins at the Arc de Triomphe. In the afternoon, Paris time, he'll head over to the Suresnes American Cemetery, where more than 1,500 American service members who lost their lives during World War I are resting in peace. The president will give remarks there, and we will have it live for you, John, 9:10 a.m. Eastern time here on the Fox News Channel tomorrow morning. See you then.
John Roberts, our chief White House correspondent, traveling with the president in France. Thanks, John. As we honor our military members on this Veterans Day, we also mark 100 years since the end of World War I.
The world came undone during those years. You can't think of the American century without understanding the impact that World War I had in drawing the U.S. onto the world stage.
The National World War I Museum is home to many artifacts from that historic battle. Fox News takes a private tour up next. Plus, migrant caravans pressing north, heading for our southern border. Why their journey is becoming even more dangerous, and the latest on President Trump's response. Thousands of Central American migrants are back on the move today, leaving Mexico City and embarking on the longest and most dangerous leg of their journey to the U.S. border. Mexico City is more than 600 miles from the nearest U.S. border crossing at McAllen, Texas. But the area around several Mexican border cities is rife with drug gangs, and the migrants consider it too risky. The route to California is considered safer. More than 5,700 troops have been deployed along the entire U.S. southwest border, and President Trump has signed a proclamation that will deny asylum to migrants who cross into the U.S. illegally. Tomorrow marks 100 years since the signing of an armistice to end World War I. We visit the National World War I Museum and Memorial in Kansas City, Missouri, where there is a tribute to the 4 million Americans who served in the Great War. Eric Shawn sits down with the museum's president.
It was called the Great War because no one could conceive that there would ever be another one. But there was. And now on the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, Sunday, November 11th, the world marks the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I, a conflict that cost so many millions of lives and cemented America's role as a global power.
The world came undone during those years. And if it was ever really put back together, it was put back together differently, wearing the wounds of World War I that we continue to live with today.
Matthew Naylor is the president of the World War I Museum and Memorial in Kansas City, Missouri, the nation's preeminent institution that marks the conflict. The memorial is unique, funded in 1919 by local residents who raised $2.5 million in just 10 days. That's $40 million today to build it. The memorial was dedicated in 1926, and all 5 Allied commanders from the war attended, as did President Calvin Coolidge. The museum and Kansas City skyline is dominated by the giant Liberty Memorial Tower. It commands a sweeping view of the city and serves as a powerful, poignant, and solemn reminder of the sacrifices of so many. Today, the museum is visited by 500,000 people each year, and the horrors from a century ago continue to resonate. The first global conflict was so barbaric, it introduced the role of modern mechanized warfare, the use of gas on the Western Front, and untold new ways for mass killing that left more than 9 million dead over 4 years.
We soon learned that there was never enough coffins, never enough ways to bury the dead, and caused the world really, I think, to gasp and step back.
The war started in 1914, and America entered on April 2nd, 1917, joining allies Britain, France, and Russia against Germany and its allies.
The trench warfare was brutal.
Yeah, terrible. Your friends are going up over the top, and many of them have been killed, and when is it going to be your turn to do that?
Our involvement marked the emergence of the United States intervention in international affairs.
You can't think of the 20th century, you can't think of the American century without understanding the impact that World War I had in drawing the US onto the world stage. World War I birthed what we know as modern America, a major player in international affairs, a tremendous industrial and financial powerhouse, a champion of ideals. That's what drew the US into the war.
But today, the First World War and our country's contribution to its victory have largely receded from the national consciousness. The last American veteran, Frank Buckles, died 7 years ago at age 110. But his legacy and the sacrifices of more than 4 million others who served and the 116,000 U.S. troops who died remains.
The tragedy is once you get past the third or the fourth generation, we tend to forget. Part of our work here is to remember those who served and to continue to tell the story and learn from the enduring impact of the war.
That includes displaying touching personal letters and diaries from troops overseas and highlighting the war's legacy that lasts today.
The reality is we live in the war's shadow here 100 years later. Every day we wake up dealing with consequences of decisions made and actions taken during World War I. And so our work is about examining that with the hope to create a more just and prosperous future.
Despite its historical significance, there is no national World War I memorial in our nation's capital, but one is planned. Like here, it will commemorate what was once called the War to End All Wars, that so sadly did not achieve that noble goal. At the National World War I Museum and Memorial in Kansas City, I'm Eric Shawn, Fox News.
And tomorrow night, be sure to catch our Veterans Day special, Modern Warriors. Pete Hegseth talks with a group of highly decorated veterans about their war stories, morale in the military, and what Veterans Day means to them. That's tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also watch the extended version on our new streaming service, Fox Nation. California firefighters with their hands full as wildfires break out up and down that state. A report from Southern California next. And we'll find out if the weather will be on their side as they attempt to gain the upper hand. Plus, anger grows among many Florida voters as recounts are ordered. Democratic candidate for governor Andrew Gillum, who previously conceded the race, now demands a recount.
We don't just get the opportunity to stop counting votes because we don't like the direction in which the vote tally is heading. That is not democratic, and that certainly is not the American way.
I'm John Scott, and this is the Fox Report. It's the bottom of the hour if you're just joining us. Wildfires raging across California. Crews battling 3 major fires burning out of control. Ventura County's fire chief asking everyone to stay alert and be safe.
I need everybody to remain vigilant. Please pay attention to the media. Pay attention to requests for evacuations. If you are in an area that is currently under a mandatory evacuation, please don't let your guard down. Please evacuate.
We have team coverage of the California wildfires. Meteorologist Adam Klotz will join us with the weather forecast shortly to see whether winds might help or hamper firefighters. But we begin with Jeff Paul, who is in Calabasas right now. Jeff?
Yeah, John, now that the winds have started to die down, we're getting a better idea of the devastation from this fire here. The Woolsey fire, you see this home right here, like many others in this Calabasas neighborhood, burned to the ground, and this fire is showing no signs of slowing down. In fact, it has grown, doubled in size to 70,000 acres. That is the size of Salt Lake City, Utah. That fire now spreading, pardon me, from the canyon area of Southern California all the way out to Malibu, where some folks are having to not only get themselves to safety, but also their horses. We spoke with one woman who's been helping other people get their horses and livestock out of harm's way, and we asked her what it's been like these last few days. Take a listen.
I just want to get out of here. I'd like to be anyplace else but this. This is hell. We got a little bit of food out. We got some food for the horses, but it's a war zone up there. I mean, houses burn everywhere. Power lines are down. The roads are blocked by trees that have fallen over. It's really bad.
A 250,000 people here in Southern California have been evacuated, 70,000 homes evacuated, and that number could rise as these winds start to pick up. As we mentioned, the winds died down today, but firefighters are already looking to the coming days, tomorrow, the next few days, as the winds start to pick up. Again, this fire is 0% contained, and they need a break in this one to get their hands around it. John?
All right, thanks very much. We'll check in with you again. Hot, dry Santa Ana winds helping to fuel those wildfires out west. So will California see any relief soon? Adam Klotz is in the Fox Extreme Weather Center with the answer. Adam?
Hey there, John. You know, this is a tough forecast for folks across California as we're going to continue to be dry and see those winds pick back up the next couple of days. Here's your satellite and radar. And as you notice, there is not a cloud in the sky, no moisture. The air has been bone dry out there. That very low humidity obviously helps spark some of these fires. So we do have high fire danger across both Southern California and Northern California, getting, again, from northern Los Angeles, getting to some of the areas that Jeff Paul was just talking about. But then again, stretching all the way down towards San Diego, all areas where fire danger is high because the winds are picking back up. And of course, we're talking about that those very dry conditions in Northern California, stretching all around, which would be right in this region. And then you get towards the Camp Fire, which is about 3 hours north, another very large fire in Northern California that's spreading quickly. It doesn't look as though the weather is going to be cooperating to help contain that in the next couple of days either. Now, it has been dry, and you're looking at least at dry conditions across most of California. You get into portions of Southern California, you get up closer to these severe or extreme levels of drought. No rain on the forecast to help with some of those conditions here in the next couple of days either. Now, the big story has been the wind. It was very windy, John, on Thursday, on Friday. Firefighters and Californians get a little bit of a break today. This has been our forecasted wind gusts, and you begin to see these colors pop up when you get winds up to 15 miles an hour. It's been relatively calm throughout the day here on Saturday, but as we head into Saturday evening, and this is a forecast model, we run overnight, you start to see some of these colors filling back up first in Northern California. As we get going into Sunday, unfortunately, it really fills up across the entire state. So fairly widespread. You suddenly have 20 to 30 mile an hour winds moving through some of these mountain ranges, the Sierra Nevadas. That really begins to pump up some of these fires and help them spread a little bit more quickly. And that is going to be picking up again on Sunday, but we're going to see it linger into Monday, see it linger into Tuesday. Now, the one thing that would help would be some rain, but we do have a big high pressure system that's kind of been driving some of those winds in. Unfortunately, here with our future cast, and I'll put it into motion, there's your timestamp up in the corner. I run through Saturday into Sunday, into Monday and Tuesday. It is just bone dry out west, John, and it's going to be so here, at least moving up for the next 5 or 6 days as those winds pick back up. Firefighters and folks there have their hands full here for a little while.
Adam Klotz. Adam, thank you. In Florida, Broward County officials are pushing back against claims of election fraud as they find themselves at the center of heated recounts in Florida's races for Senate and governor. And several key races remain undecided nearly 4 days after all polls closed on Tuesday. Here to talk about it, John Bussey, associate editor at the Wall Street Journal. I lived in Miami, what's now Miami-Dade County, for 14 years, so I know something about Broward politics. They have had problems with election, with election fraud, frankly.
Yeah. Well, and just
so is this incompetence or is this fraud that we're seeing down
or just problems getting it done, right? And in this instance, the president is also saying that there seems to be malfeasance here, and the Democrats trying to steal votes. Scott is claiming fraud. And
Governor Rick Scott.
In the Senate race. And in fact, the Secretary of State says, no, The officials in law enforcement who've investigated say no, that this is kind of the manner in which languorous Florida politics happens, and you have these long drawn-out counts. Now, we may find out at the end of this that there was some fraudulent activity, but there's no evidence of that now. This is kind of another instance of the president basically speaking falsehood, not having any evidence to back up his claims. That said, we got to remember also that the Republicans are angry about this round. In 2020, we had the same kind of drawn-out recount in Florida, and it resulted in a Republican presidential win.
2000.
So,
yeah.
in 2000. So it can go both ways.
But the Broward election supervisor is supposed to report vote counts to the Secretary of State every 45 minutes. They're not doing that. They're supposed to report the total number of ballots that came in, mailed ballots and absentee ballots. They didn't do that. It just seems like there are all kinds of windows here for the possibility of fraud.
Fraud or ineptitude, or just takes a long time to count as many votes as come in an election in the United States. And why it's not more efficient, why we haven't been able to make ballots consistent from state to state to make them clearer for people, we don't know. But it's not just Florida. We have across the country election results coming in very slowly. At the beginning of the results on election night, we thought the Democrats had won. Fine. They had kind of gotten upwards of somewhere in the 20s, more seats in the House. Now it's in the 30s because slowly but surely these results have come in around the country and have gone against the Republicans. I think that's angering the president ever more. He sees that the wave really did materialize, and it materialized in the House where there was a repudiation. He said, look, this is a vote about me. This is a national vote about me. Well, guess what? More than 30 House seats appear to be going the other way.
Yeah, well, in that Arizona Senate race, you still have 500,000 almost ballots to be counted. That seems a little odd this far after election.
Well, again, it's happening in spotted races across the country where late voting happened, or ballots came in after the mailing date and absentee ballots from abroad. This is kind of an inefficient American electoral process.
Let me read you a recent tweet just in the last half hour or so from Senator Marco Rubio. He writes, Broward election officials admit the vote count they submitted to state includes 22 illegal votes. We know about these 22 because they got caught breaking law in reviewing 202 ballots, so roughly 10%. How can anyone trust more illegal votes aren't in their final count? And that really is the question. There are a lot of questions about the legality of the vote count.
Well, that's Marco Rubio, a partisan in this fight. Again, the legal authorities in Florida say nothing has happened. Nothing out of the ordinary has happened. Whether or not down the road we do find that, not just in Florida, but other places there was incidents of election fraud, that remains to be seen. But the authorities are saying, no, this is just the inefficient process by which votes get counted in Florida. And it's playing out. It's playing out into a recount. Now, look, also, this was a very close race. These kinds of things don't happen when there's hundreds of thousands of votes separating the two contestants. That's not the case in this instance, and that's why you're seeing so much friction and so much anger over this particular counting process, is that usually you don't have to have this kind of discussion of a recount.
Alan Dershowitz was on Fox and Friends this morning on whether Rick Scott, the outgoing governor, and Bill Nelson, the sitting senator, are going to wind up in court over this. Here's what he had to say.
I think both sides are ready for it, but I think you don't get to court on incompetence. Incompetence is just part of being American. We have a lot of incompetent public officials. You have to prove willful and deliberate fraud to get into court. And the question is, will the courts allow depositions and evidence taking to make this a case?
So what do you think about that assessment?
He's right. It's going to require some kind of clear allegation of fraud with evidence. And so far, the evidence isn't there. Watch what's happening in Georgia as well. This one's kind of meandering toward a recount. It might get there. And there you had a Secretary of State, a Republican, who was running for the governorship, who was overseeing the election itself. If ever there was kind of something that might open the door to possible legal challenges, that's one.
One of the interesting questions about this new Congress, which is going to be led by the Democrats, is will Nancy Pelosi be elected Speaker of the House? There are a lot of candidates who won their races who said they would not support her.
That's right.
Speaker.
That's right. It might be dicier for her than she thinks. She's saying, look, it's 100% locked up. I'm going to be the next Speaker of the House. And you can see President Trump kind of wanting that. You know, he's saying, hey, she should be elected because he wants to be able to run against her in 2020. She's a lightning rod, and it's a way of galvanizing his base against Nancy Pelosi. She feels that she's going to be able to wrangle the votes on this. She's pretty savvy in wrangling votes, just like Mitch McConnell has proven to be so in the Senate. She contends that she's going to be able to convince people, and she's got a lot of power to do that. She'll be able to hand out chairmanships of various committees and other sort of baubles for people to vote for her.
And the opposition to her is pretty muted right now.
So far it is. Who wants to, at this particular moment, stand up and get their head lopped off, possibly, by Nancy Pelosi? I mean, we'll see whether somebody steps forward. So far, they haven't. And the House may also be thinking, you know, we need somebody who's a good ringmaster going into the 2020 process for us.
As you said, she knows how to wrangle the votes.
And lop off heads.
Yeah. John Bussey. John, thank you.
Pleasure.
So the Florida recount will be front and center on Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace has an exclusive interview with Republican Governor and Senate candidate Rick Scott. That's tomorrow at 2 and 7 p.m. Eastern right here on Fox News Channel. Past criticisms of the Mueller investigation sparking major scrutiny for acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. How President Trump now appears to be distancing himself from the controversy. And the king of rock and roll getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's just one of several icons being honored this year. The other big names after the